The New York Times wrote a long article about the heroic efforts by a veteran who helped save lives in Colorado Springs in that terrible mass shooting where a crazy guy went into a gay nightclub and killed 5 people and injured 18 others. But let's talk about what I think is the real lesson from this tragedy, and not the lesson drawn by the New York Times. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Box of Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and New York Times bestselling author. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so. We're working really hard to try to get our subscribers up. It's taken a while, and we're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers as fast as we can. We'd appreciate your help. All right, so there's a terrible mass shooting in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at a gay nightclub. We've all read that in the papers. 5 individuals were killed and 18 people were injured. A terrible story. But I want to talk a little bit about a New York Times article that properly applauded the heroic efforts of a military veteran who I think had been in the military for something like 15 years. Obviously a great hero here. He was unarmed in the gay nightclub with his family when the armed crazy guy went in and started shooting up the place. And after a few minutes, apparently, according to the news reports that I read, the veteran, subdued the gunman. He ran over, tackled the gunman or grabbed the gunman, took away the firearm, the handgun, from the gunman and began to beat the perpetrator, the shooter, with the handgun and stopped the mass shooting at that time. It's a very heroic effort. I applaud the veteran for being there. And the New York Times was all over the fact, and here's like one of the major headlines they wrote: a combat veteran saved a lot of lives when he tackled the Colorado gunman. And while I applaud the fact that this veteran tackled the Colorado gunman and saved lives, I 100% applaud him completely for this. My question is, what's the real lesson from this? Again, as much as I applaud the unarmed hero, it seems to me that the real lesson here is that wouldn't have people been better off and wouldn't lives have been saved if armed citizens in the nightclub were able to respond immediately and shoot the bad guy and drop him dead, or at least deter the threat or stop the threat, as opposed to waiting several minutes for the veteran to ultimately tackle this guy and to beat him with the gun and all that. As heroic as that is, it seems to me if armed people were there, they could have had the potential to immediately, shoot this guy and end the threat right then and there, possibly even before anyone was killed or anyone was injured. No way to know, of course. But the bottom line is, as much as we want to applaud unarmed people going after an armed man and how heroic that is, the reality is it would make a lot more sense, in my opinion, to have armed people confronting bad dudes and killing them or shooting them or neutralizing the threat with firearms, as opposed to, because keep the following in mind. In many of these instances, you won't have an armed combat veteran who is near the shooter, competent to handle the stress and able to deal with it and actually, tackle the guy, right? It's not always doable. And again, as we know, what if the people that were close to the door were not combat veterans, which was the case in Colorado Springs, but what if it was, an older person, someone that wasn't trained, someone was just sitting there, an ordinary, what chance would they have? And again, it seems to me the better lesson that the New York Times should be asking about is, why didn't anyone in that nightclub have a firearm in a position where they could shoot and kill the bad guy, or at least neutralize the threat? And again, I think if 4 people had pulled out their 9mm and shot this guy, it would have led to less lives lost and less injuries. That's just my best guess. One never knows how things would play out counterfactually or counterhistorically. What's another thing, of course, is interesting about the Colorado Springs situation is, did you notice that yet again, there was no police officers on the scene. There was no law enforcement. There was no government on the scene. So again, it required a civilian, albeit an unarmed civilian with combat training, to stop this threat and neutralize the bad guy. But the reality was there's no cops or first responders or anyone to respond, which reaffirms what I've been saying for many, many, many years. And I want you all to use this line if you don't already use it, which is, we are all our own first responders, because the police, the fire, the EMTs are really second and third responders. We're the first responders because we deal with the criminals, the bad guys, the sick people, the fires, whatever is first. We are the real first responders. The government at best is a second or third responders. And last is, we also know that the facts are coming out, but there looks to be something very sketchy about what happened with the shooter. A year ago, it looks like he was, based on the news reports, that this was a guy that had threatened to blow up his home and to kill his mother. The police responded to this. They shut down the whole neighborhood and evacuated the neighborhood because he allegedly had a bomb. And yet nothing happened to this guy. It appears, based on the reports, he may have not even been arrested. He certainly wasn't convicted of a crime. It doesn't look like he was even tried or charged with a crime. Very unusual circumstance that a guy that threatens to blow up a neighborhood with a bomb, threatens to kill his mother, requires like a 3 or 4 hour standoff in the family home a year ago. Somehow nothing at all happens to this guy in any respect. One wonders what the heck was going on there. Only time will tell, but again, as to why this guy wasn't locked up for what happened a year earlier, inquiring minds are going to want to know. Based on what I'm reading about these news reports, assuming these news reports are true, it seems like the shooter was kind of a psycho and people knew it. And yet, again, nothing happened to him ahead of time, which goes back to my fundamental point, which is, we cannot rely on government to protect us. And again, my new conclusion, which I reached several months ago, is that armed citizens are better than armed police, because at the end of the day, the reason why the police have guns is to protect themselves and not us. We're an afterthought at best. We have a vested interest. The people getting shot at or attacked by criminals, they have skin in the game, and they're the ones that, in my opinion, are most effective, and they're the ones that have the guns or should have the guns because, again, they have skin in the game. They're the ones whose lives are at stake. It's their families' lives are at stake, as we saw from this hero combat veteran in Colorado Springs, as he was there at the club protecting his family, and that's great. He was so heroic. But again, I really do ask myself, wouldn't we had all been better, and wouldn't the people have been better if there was armed citizens in that room able to shoot back immediately when the psychopathic shooter came in to shoot up the place, regardless of whatever this guy's motive is, whatever the motive was, it was evil, and he needed to be neutralized and shut down immediately. And obviously he wasn't, because he had enough time to shoot and kill 5 people and injure 18 others. So obviously some time passed to give him that time that he needed to inflict that harm. And I would have liked to have seen him neutralized much sooner. And I think armed citizens would have been in a better position to do so than waiting several minutes for an unarmed combat veteran to step up and play the role of hero. Although I do applaud him for his heroic actions. Still, again, in the long run, we're better off with armed citizens and not unarmed citizens, because obviously guns save lives. We all know that. That's why people with guns surround VIPs like the President of the United States. Okay, I hope you learned a little bit something here at the 4 Boxes Diner. Again, please subscribe and encourage others to do so. We're trying to improve our situation with the algorithm to get to 100,000 subscribers. And again, if we hope you learned something, and we'll see you again soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.